Welcome to this edition of Silicon Slopes Live. We're here with Greg Ott from NAV. Greg, how are you?
Doing well. How are you doing, Clint?
Doing so good. Hey, Greg, NAV has been in this game for a long time, connecting businesses to resources and financing. This must be a strange time for you.
It really is. So much has gotten flipped on its head. And, we've always been passionate about solving for small businesses, the Main Street businesses around. And this is crazy time, both the economic crisis, they're bearing the brunt of it. And now with this Paycheck Protection Program, they're still struggling to get access to that capital. So it's definitely been a crazy time.
So give people and those watching, small business owners, entrepreneurs, some hope. How's it going? What should they be thinking about right now?
Well, the program, so it's hard. The economic crisis is definitely they're bearing the brunt of that, and small businesses have always had to run their businesses kind of on a shoestring. There's data that says most small businesses have less than 30 days cash on hand. There was a really interesting study done by a publication that said, it measured, everybody's, I can last a month, and now we're about 2 to 3 weeks into this crisis, and it doesn't look like it's abating. So, the government did the right thing, right? Is because the required actions for the healthcare crisis are affecting those small businesses. So they're trying to push money into the system. But we're seeing the same thing we've seen actually for years, which is the banking system isn't necessarily set up to help most Main Street small businesses. The banking system helps people who have 5 years time in business and great credit and great cash flows and all those things. And that's what they're there for. Over the past 5 years, or basically since the last financial crisis, this whole segment of alternative lenders has grown up. Online lenders who have reduced the cost of lending, differentiate on how they price risk. And that's how a lot of small businesses have been able to access the capital they need. And so far, they've been cut out of the Paycheck Protection Program. But the hope is right now is that they're making changes. If you follow along, they've actually issued new guidelines or changed the program literally almost every day. And there was just some content released by the Treasury that they're going to make some more changes within the next 24 hours to try and help increase the flow of capital to small businesses. So the hope is they're going to continue to work out the kinks and get capital to the small businesses that need it so that they can weather the storm.
So do you think it's I know Friday was a bit of a cluster when they were going to roll this thing out, and a lot of banks weren't ready, and it didn't even seem like the SBA or the federal government was ready. Now we're Monday. A lot of those kinks been worked out.
I think what they figured out where the kinks are, and there's a technical kinks, and that the system they use, this E-Trans, looks like it was built on Windows 98, and only a subset of lenders have access to the system. And so they're trying to create more access to the system and scale the system. So there's technical things there. And then there's an alignment of incentives that they're continuing to work on, right? Because as you saw, if you followed it, even the banks that were lending were prioritizing their VIP customers, their big customers. In fact, probably the customers who didn't necessarily need the money the most. But the banks weren't really incentivized to take any further risk. So they were de-risking themselves by prioritizing people that they had already underwritten or lent to. So all those things I think are being worked out or are being addressed. I don't know which ones will have changes how soon, but I know there's going to be changes within the next 24 hours to basically work out at least some of those kinks.
Greg, how should folks work with NAV during this time? I mean, and if they have questions, how do they get in contact?
Yeah, and so NAV has, as we said, we've been doing a lot on lending and qualifications, and we've been heavily involved. I was on a call with senior advisor to the House and Small Business last week. And so we've got a whole resource section. And the number one thing that they can do is just figure out what they might be eligible for. And we've got calculators and content, and then start to figure out what documentation they're going to need in order to be ready. What's been interesting is it's the Paycheck Protection Program, but how you calculate that has some ambiguity to it. And so we've got a whole lot of resources. We've got a Facebook group where we're doing Q&A live, helping people work things through. And then we can connect people to other resources if they need it, such as for some businesses that have complex employee situations, we'll connect you to an accountant or a financial advisor who can help you work through those tax forms that you need. But we've got a broad range of resources to help small businesses and help them get ready. We can also help them with alternatives. There are some alternatives, not only the disaster relief program, but there are some lenders who are still lending capital to small business in certain verticals. There are options such as getting a new business credit card. If you didn't have one before, that can give you a line of credit and extend your runway. And we've got all those resources set up for you at NAV.
So how should they, where should they go? How should they contact
Just
NAV?
nav.com, nav.com. And
What a domain, by the way. Well done.
well, we got to get better at making sure people understand it's to help small businesses navigate the path to getting the capital they need for their business. And we've always been there with a set of online tools. NAV is the only place you can get your free business and personal credit scores right next to one another, which tells you what you're qualified for. Now, credit scores today and the urgency aren't as critical in this PPP program, but they will be in the future. So as we start to come through this crisis, small businesses are really going to have to look at how credit worthy they are and how they're going to be judged by lenders and other vendors.
Greg, how is NAV holding up in all of this? The company itself, how are you adjusting to, I mean, the world's quite a bit different than it was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I think a lot of companies can empathize with one another. Moving to an entirely distributed workforce, when you spend years creating connective tissue and a culture around how you interact together, that gets really hard. I've been so impressed by the NAV organization. You know, our company is passionately focused on solving for these small businesses, solving for this segment of the market that often gets overlooked, and so they've just been digging in hard in spite of all the distractions. And we're doing the Zoom conferences, and you got kids running around the background, but I can just, the team is so committed to saying we've got to create a better solution. So we built the online application that we then can connect to the lenders who are lending capital. And that team cranked that out in just a couple of days because they're working hard, but everybody's working through distraction, and we just try and keep people connected as much as we can. We do a Friday afternoon, instead of a fireside chat, it's a Zoom side chat. We just talk as a company. We got all 130 or so employees on that, and it's just sharing stories, sharing how your week was, and just trying to bring people together. So, I think the big thing in most companies is, you feel a lot of social isolation is tough, right? And so how do you feel like you're not alone in what you're doing all day long and trying to build that connective tissue as a company?
Well, Greg, best of luck to you and the team. I'm sure we'll have you back on as this thing progresses, because NAV's right in the middle of it, and the work you're doing is super important. Everyone go to nav.com for resources. Greg, thanks so much for coming on. It means a lot.
Great. Thanks for having me, Clint.
Appreciate it. See ya.